Hello, and welcome to Smooth Musings, a podcast brought to you by Smooth Fusion. I'm your host today, Todd Knowlton, and I have Gary Evans, our Director of IT and Innovation, with me today to talk about the things to consider when hosting a Sitefinity website on the cloud. Welcome, Gary.
Hey, thanks, Todd. Good to be here.
So back in the 90s, I actually ran servers myself to host sites for Microsoft. And in the either late 90s or 2000, Gary came along and started working with me and my team back then as we were running on-premise servers. Then Gary actually joined Smooth Fusion in 2006, left the company for a little while, came back. We used to make those runs to the data center in the middle of the night to work on servers. And so when things started moving to the cloud, it was actually a pretty attractive option for folks like us to offload some of that worry to somebody else. And so we're still big fans of cloud hosting, right, Gary?
Yeah, huge fans of cloud hosting.
Huge fans. So today we're going to specifically talk about hosting Sitefinity in the cloud. And I should mention that Progress, who is the maker of Sitefinity, they have a cloud offering of their own called Sitefinity Cloud. And so you may have heard that referred to. Sitefinity Cloud is an offering that bundles the Sitefinity license and cloud hosting together. And it is on Microsoft Azure, same as what we do here at Smooth Fusion. And so the things we talk about here today should, pretty much be applicable whether you're using Sitefinity Cloud or hosting with Smooth Fusion or some other option for hosting Sitefinity on the cloud. So most of these things should be applicable either way. So, but before we really get too specific into cloud hosting, Gary, just tell us just what are some of the important things to consider when hosting a Sitefinity website in particular?
Yeah, so just in general, when you're thinking about hosting Sitefinity somewhere, you need to make sure they do .NET framework hosting. Sitefinity is written on Microsoft technologies. It's .NET framework. And so that's the first thing, is make sure that the host can handle .NET code and it can run well, which generally just means there's an IIS server in the background somewhere actually running the website. Another thing to consider is resource consumption. So, how much CPU is that thing going to use? How much RAM is it going to consume? A large Sitefinity site can consume a lot of RAM. It's a lot of pages, and when Sitefinity spins up, it caches all that stuff to make it fast for the end user, and that requires a lot of RAM. So that can fill up or use up all your RAM on those servers. So you need to consider that. How large is your Sitefinity site? And then if you're going to be making a lot of changes constantly in the back end and doing things, that can consume some CPU. So when Sitefinity starts up, it consumes a lot of CPU to get all those pages nice and fast and cached. So you got to consider those things. Is it a small site or a large site? And what kind of resources is the cloud provider going to offer?
Okay, very good. Yeah, and so for those who maybe have never really explored cloud hosting, just kind of what are some of the advantages of hosting in the cloud?
Yeah, so the one that is always number one is scalability. You can scale so quickly and easily in the cloud. When we used to host those resources ourselves and we wanted to add another server, I mean, it's purchasing a physical server, it's driving to the data center, it's physically installing it, and then adding it to the load back. There's all these things that have to happen on the back end. With the cloud, there's generally a nice interface where you can scale that thing up to 20 servers in a matter of seconds. And the load balancing is all handled, and the traffic distribution just works out well. It's all set up and it just works. So that's a huge one. Scale. You can scale very, very quickly in the cloud. Failover is another easy thing to do in the cloud. Setting up a second geographic region was a very, very expensive thing in the past. Now you can set up another web app in another region and quickly and easily put that as a failover location for the web app. So that's easy. You also get resources of these big, massive providers that work on the infrastructure all day, every day. So if there's a problem, you could have 20 or 40 or 100 people working on that problem very, very quickly. Whereas in the past, you might have you and a small team that would have to drive out somewhere and fix this stuff yourself. So these cloud providers have lots of resources available when there's a problem, or when they want to add a new technology or add another cluster of servers, and they do that well, and they do it every day. Of course, uptime is a big deal in the cloud. We mentioned failover and load balancing, so that increases your uptime. These big SQL backends have incredible uptime. I mean, 99.99% uptime. They're just very large, and they have a lot of redundancy built in, and so uptime increases with the cloud. And with some of that redundancy is hardware redundancy on all levels. So from the networking equipment to the front end load balancing equipment to the back end, there's lots of redundant hardware, and that stuff is easy to add and take away. These big cloud providers give you, different networking options and firewalls and storage and all this stuff, and that's so easy to simply add. You want to add a big storage container, a few button clicks, and you get a 5 terabyte storage container. So so many advantages to hosting in the cloud. It's been really nice for clients, and it's been nice for us to get to host things in the cloud for people.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit more about scaling. So you mentioned if you needed to add servers, what's that look like when you're in the cloud when you need to scale up or down?
Yeah, so we love Azure Web Apps. That's a platform as a service offering, and each cloud provider has some version of a web app, or an app service is really what they call it. But there's some version of some sort of platform as a service hosting. And that just means, Microsoft or Azure or Google handles the platform itself, all the back-end infrastructure, and they present you with a nice interface that's just like, here's the application and here's all the things you can do to it on a web front end. So for that, scaling is very simple. In the interface that they provide you, most of the time you can go in there and have a slider, and you can drag that thing up from 1 to 20 instances. And it's a matter of seconds, and you've got 20 instances spun up. And then also that communicates with the load balancer to say, all right, traffic coming to your website, divided out between these 20 instances that we've just spun up. And all that really happens automatically. And then you can get granular. You can say, hey, if my website starts to receive a lot of traffic, scale up to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 instances. And then at night, maybe when my website is not getting traffic, scale that back down to 1 instance. So you have a lot of control over how many instances you can quickly scale. And so we call that scaling out. So that's scaling to multiple instances. The other kind of scaling is scaling up. So that's to say, all right, I'm running my website on this size of web app. So that's, how much CPU can we spike up to, and how much RAM can my web app consume? Well, you can scale that up to a bigger one. Say, all right, well, now I want to consume twice as much RAM and twice as much CPU. And that's really nice too. Oftentimes we like to scale up before we scale out, because it speeds up the one website instant. We want more CPU and more RAM and more resources like that.
And how about on the database side? How is that different?
So the database side, it's similar. You get what they call DTUs, which is just a measure of how much horsepower this database can consume. And you can have 10 DTUs. You can do something very small, or you can, with a slider, again, you can just drag that thing up to a massive database of 1,000 DTUs if you wanted. So we use these we things called elastic pools, and every provider has some form of that. And so you can scale those databases up or down. We like to let them share. So we have this massive, huge database server that can do, 300 or 400 DTUs, and your database might consume one or two generally. But if all of a sudden you get a lot of traffic, that thing can spike up to 300 and then back down. And so it's really nice to have these pools where little small databases that generally might not need it can consume if they need it, and the site keeps performing quickly.
Very good. So obviously security is in the forefront of everybody's mind, no matter how they host. So talk about how security is handled on the cloud, and even if there's some specific things that we do in addition to that, you can talk about that as well.
Right. Yeah, security is a big deal. And really, this is one of the advantages of moving to the cloud, is some of that security is offloaded to the cloud provider and these big IT teams, right? So like physical infrastructure, we don't have to worry about anymore. Microsoft and Amazon, they're following all of these rules for SOC compliance or PCI compliance or HIPAA compliance, and their facilities are secure. They've got access control systems. Everything is locked down so the right people can only access certain resources at the right time. And all of that physical kind of server security that we used to have to worry about is now handled by the cloud provider. So then on our end, we lock things down at a different level. So we say, okay, only allow this kind of traffic to this website if it meets these requirements. So it's just a very small amount of, encrypted traffic allowed to come to your website. And then we take it further and protect all of that with another cloud provider that we use called Cloudflare. And there's other competitors like that. And they secure the website from DDoS attacks and web application firewalls and all that on the front end too. So yeah, security is a big deal. And cloud providers have made it very, very easy for us to provide those tools to protect your website.
So tell us, what is a DDoS attack?
Yeah, the distributed denial of service attack. So that is where a lot of little bots, if you will, get installed on thousands of computers around the country, around the world, really. And most people might not even know they have it because they've been hacked. And all of a sudden, a hacker says, go. And those computers send whatever kind of traffic, whatever they're trying to exploit, all at the same time to your website. And so it just overloads it. And so your website can't respond anymore. So it breaks some part of the web app that overwhelms it, and then legitimate traffic can't get through.
And so what does Cloudflare do to handle that situation?
Yeah, so we actually have an instance in the last week where a client got a denial of service attack. And it was so wonderful because this Cloudflare was sitting in front of this client's website, and it immediately recognized it. We got an alert saying, "Hey, you're getting a whole lot of traffic that's unusual here." And so we looked and we clicked a button that said, "Yeah, I think we're in a denial of service attack." And Cloudflare immediately started verifying every single bit of traffic that came to that website. And so if you couldn't pass verification, it stopped it at the front of their cloud. So it never even made it past Cloudflare to Azure to your web app. It was stopped at the front end. So all legitimate traffic came through. The site was very fast, but it was about 2 million requests every 24 hours that Cloudflare was blocking. Client never even noticed. I mean, it wasn't even a hiccup.
Yeah.
But as soon as it started coming in, we saw the resource consumption. Like, CPU started going up, and it's like, oh man, we're getting flooded. And just quickly and seamlessly, we were able to stop it. So that's the nice thing about these modern tools and big giant Cloudflare type providers. They can stop it quickly and easily.
Yeah, for sure. Because especially in the old days when those things didn't exist, somebody attempted a denial of service attack or something like that, you really just had to wait it out. You really didn't have a way to stop it, and so they were really really bad. So it's great.
Exactly.
So you mentioned a while ago data centers and physical security, and also, even though obviously we call it the cloud, these are very physical buildings that are actually down here on Earth. So I don't know, just speak a little to that in terms of, like, I know AWS and Microsoft all have many data centers spread around. So what does that mean to us, as a user? Why do we care? What is what is there for us to care about when it comes to data centers?
Yeah. So each of these cloud providers have hundreds of data centers now all around the world. And that's really nice because it allows you to get the traffic closer to your user base. So that's usually the first thing is if you're if mainly you have users in the West Coast or East Coast or Europe or wherever, you can choose to put your web app there. So it's close. It doesn't have to travel across the ocean for your users to reach because even though the internet is fast and vast, that kind of latency is noticeable. And so you want to get your traffic close to your users. If you have a distributed user base, that's also nice because then you can put a web app, on the West Coast and then put a web app on the East Coast. And so these intelligent load balancers will say, all right, if you're on the West Coast, serve your users content from the West Coast website. If you're on the East Coast, do it from there. There's all these different options and places you can put your website, and it's just a better experience for the user. It makes it quick, and it gives you some geographic redundancy, right? So if something hit the West Coast data center, well, that's no problem. You've got your site set up in the East Coast as well. So yeah, it might be a little slower for the West Coast users if that data center got wiped out, but your site is still up and it's still fairly fast for most users. So lots of options.
Yeah, well, that's great. So, obviously, I know you personally were among some of the first people to ever host Sitefinity on Microsoft Azure. And Smooth Fusion as a company, we started offering that for Sitefinity sites in 2014, I believe. And Microsoft Azure is still where we do our cloud hosting today. So just talk a little bit about the options that we offer our customers, and kind of what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah. We started in 2014, like you said, and even though Sitefinity did not say it was supported, we just started asking the question of, well, why not? It's like we understand Azure and we understand Sitefinity. And so we just started tackling each one of the things that might have been a hurdle for running Sitefinity in the cloud. And we quickly realized that it wasn't that hard. And, then we got the benefits of the cloud. And so we've been doing it ever since. And I feel like we have that down pretty well as far as how to run a Sitefinity site in the cloud, in Azure as a web app. We offer several different plans. All of our plans are on an Azure web app with that SQL database, the elastic piece that we were talking about, and the ability for web apps to quickly spin up if there's a problem with one of them. So we get all those advantages of the cloud. We also protect all the websites with a Cloudflare business plan. So it's got SLA, it's got the DDoS protection that we talked about. It has a dynamic web application firewall with rules that are constantly being updated to protect your site. So that's kind of our standard hosting. We offer vulnerability scans with that. Another piece is we offer a whole pipeline of environments. So when you're developing your site or we're developing your site, that site can sit on a development instance. So you can test things and check things there. Linearly, you can roll that to a staging instance. So you can have QA check there, and then you can roll that again, deploy that to the live instance. So that's kind of all the normal standard stuff that we offer in our plan. We have another plan that goes one step further and says, all right, if you want some geographic failover, we'll add that piece to it. So we just take everything we set up in that Azure environment we talked about, and we duplicate it in another geographic region. So that region is not being used unless the first region fails. And then your site will automatically fail over to that region. That database will swap over to that region, and your traffic will be served from there. That's kind of our second tier. And then a third tier, which is really intended for high traffic, is your site will run on dedicated app service plans and multiple app service plans. So that's more of a true load balancing situation. So in the first region, you've got two of them, and traffic is distributed between those two. But again, that's for pretty high traffic situations. But yeah, those are our three plans. They seem to work well. They're highly secure with Cloudflare, secure with Azure. They're quick. They're good plans. We like them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, thanks, Gary. And yeah, if you've got any questions out there about cloud hosting specifically for Sitefinity or just cloud hosting in general, please let us know. We'd be happy to help you. And thanks for listening today to Smooth Musings. Have a great day.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Smooth Musings. If you liked today's episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone, and rate us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is presented by Smooth Fusion. If you'd like more information about Smooth Fusion and how we help our customers with websites, custom software, and more, go to www.smoothfusion.com.